Hi, welcome to the Mosaic Dad Project. I'm Jesse Andrist. I'm the founder of Chobby Outfitters. I founded Chobby Outfitters to make products to validate and celebrate the decision to be an involved dad. Along that same line, we're producing content to do the same. This is the Mosaic Dad Project. I unfortunately lost my dad when I was 12 years old. It was the biggest heartbreak of my life. But something really interesting happened from that experience. When I became a dad, I had to put together examples of people I liked as dads, people I didn't like as dads, things I wanted to do, things I wanted to give my kids, to look around and put together sort of a mosaic of what I thought a good dad was. So this project has grown out of that. I have met so many great fathers along the way that I want to showcase. I'm going to sit down and interview friends and family to give you a moving portrait of the modern dad, to see how different he can be, how he's changing from past generations, and what he's doing because he loves his kids. So I wouldn't ask my friends to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. So this first interview you're going to see is me answering the questions that I'm about to ask my friends. So come back and find us. We're going to do this every 2 weeks, and it's going to start out as episodes of me and my friends answering these questions about becoming a dad and being a dad. But I think even better, after that, we're going to be able to cut these answers together and come up with some common answers to questions people have about becoming a dad and being a dad. And I'll be able to put together, 15, 20, 30 examples and perspectives from friends and myself on what it means to be a dad, the best ways to be a dad, mistakes that have been made, and I can't wait to put that together. For now, come and see us every 2 weeks for these episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Get over to our website at chobbyoutfitters.com. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy this first episode with me, and come back to see all my friends. Pregnancy announcement. So my wife and I are living in West Virginia at the time, and we are in a tiny bizarre house, and I was asleep and she came running in, and if anyone knows my wife, she's got a lot of energy, running in to wake me up, screaming and excited. I think my biggest emotion then was excitement, but there was definitely a tinge of sort of reality setting in, and a little bit of fear, and not really knowing what was coming up, not really knowing what to expect about the next section of our life that seemed to begin right then. The planning process for me was pretty hands-off. My wife is a pediatrician, so I didn't really, even if I had an opinion, it wasn't very educated. So I defaulted to her on a lot of it, which was a little bit of a relief, as well as my wife knew a lot of people at the hospitals where she was working and where we were going to deliver. So she had sort of the inside track on who to go to, who was best, and that, as well as, I think a lot of men probably feel the same way, that it's her body. This is a really, really physical thing that is happening, and so I very much wanted her to feel like it was also her choice of how she wanted to do it, and where. I really wouldn't have pushed any of my opinions or feelings on it, because it's not me that had to go through it. One thing I definitely did not understand about pregnancy was how long the wait was. 9 months of being excited but not being able to do something is crazy. I could not have understood how long that was until I went through it, and it didn't get any shorter with the other 2 kids. It just kept feeling longer and longer because there's nothing you could do. I felt extremely useless, and another thing that happened is I didn't feel very connected to the baby, or the pregnancy, really. Even when she'd ask me to feel the baby's kicking or the ultrasounds, I had a little bit of worry at my lack of excitement. I didn't feel everything I expected to feel, and that didn't come until the kids were born. With all three of them, the second they were born, it was just an absolutely, biological change, chemical reaction that just flooded me. But up to that, I had sort of a worry about how little I felt, and that's just. My wife did not have any crazy cravings that I had to go out and get for her. There were a few food things that came up. The main thing was that she was clearly hungry. A couple times I got home from work late and didn't let her know I was coming late, and so she was really upset that she couldn't eat. And I'm a little confused. Like, well, then why wouldn't you just start eating if I'm not home? But it's not exactly a rational feeling that she's having. She just was really hungry and upset and wanting some food. So do the best you can and get her anything she asks for. I absolutely put on sympathy weight. Weight is something I struggle with, and I'm sure a lot of people do struggle with, or if they haven't struggled with it before, they may have an introduction to that when their wife gets pregnant. And if you're active and you're watching out for it, I'm sure you could head it off. I didn't. I'm sure I put on probably 15 to 20 pounds. And yeah, it just is what it is. It's not real exciting, but it's something that I see happening. Watching my wife's body change through that process of pregnancy was really, I just found it very beautiful. I wasn't sure how I would feel about it. I wasn't necessarily looking forward to it. I wasn't necessarily I wasn't really dreading it. But my overall feeling about it was that it was just beautiful. I think you have an understanding of what's happening and what needs to happen to her body for that to come to fruition is just exciting, or it was to me. In the naming process, my wife and I looked heavily into family names and people we love and care about. So that was absolutely a component of all three of our kids' names. But then also, it was a balance. We didn't just pick the people we love the most, because we have some bizarre names in our families too, but we picked the people that meant something to us and that just had beautiful sounding names to us. So as meaningful as it is to have family names, a big part of it also was just that we really like the names. I certainly didn't come up with a lot of the names, but I was happy to give my opinion afterwards. My wife was much better about thinking about coming up with names and combinations, and I didn't have a strong feeling about having a say. One thing that was really beautiful to me was my wife let me name our son after my father, which, if you follow this Mosaic Dad project, that's why I've started the project. Losing my father was interesting because when I became a dad, I had to look for different examples of how to be a dad. So I put together a mosaic of what I thought a good dad was. That's how this project started, and so it was wonderful that my wife allowed me to name our son after my father. It meant a lot to me, and holding him for the first time, whether it was because it was a son or because of the name, it really was something else. It was really overwhelming. It was an intensity of emotion that I really hadn't felt before. It's really beautiful. My nervous to excited ratio going into the process was probably really skewed. I was highly excited and almost not at all nervous, and that's probably had a lot to do with just being naive and not fully understanding or comprehending what could go wrong, as well as there's a bit of ease and comfort that my wife is a physician, and we knew all the physicians that we would be working with during that process that helped ease my mind a bit. And going into that process without having that background would be a little daunting to me. There's a few small things that when you're a physician, or you're married to a physician that you know to ask for, you know to be certain of, that I wouldn't have known to be worried about it, but it really worries me that so many people don't know to ask about these things. Some of them would be insisting on your OB-GYN to come and check in on you. A lot of times in today's medical settings, they want to utilize mid-level providers as much as they can. So it's a little difficult to really see and get a very involved OB-GYN. And so that was something that I don't know that everyone knows they want, but I believe they would want if they understood kind of what was happening. I also think that the anesthesia process can be a really scary one if you're not sure what's going on, and especially if you're not able to get an anesthesiologist right away, if you're getting a mid-level or someone else that's helping, because this is a somewhat routine thing. That's a scary thought to me, and it's something that we were really adamant about, was making sure we had an anesthesiologist and one that we trusted. And a mistake we made there with all of our kids is waiting a little long. We waited long on all of them because my wife just has a real high pain tolerance and did really well, and so we ended up being just a little bit too late for some of those, and not being able to. Christina didn't really have the full effect, or it would only work on one side or something like that. And those are all things that come up and just happen in the moment, and they're scary, but it helped me a lot to have a little bit of insight from my wife and knowing the people we were working with. If I didn't have that, I'm not sure exactly how I would have approached it. I probably just would have had a little bit more fear and had to have at some point just given some trust to who I was working with. And knowing what I know now, if I had to go through it without a physician giving birth, I think I would put some work into making sure I'm working with people I trust, the OB-GYN and the nurses. Just making sure they're people that I trust. And you can't plan all that either, because a lot of times you hear stories of getting to the hospital and the OB-GYN is out at dinner, or he's gone on a trip that you didn't know about, something like that. And so there's other things you have to trust in and get comfortable with as well. One emotion I really felt in the delivery room was or not emotion, but a feeling I really had in the delivery room was just uselessness. I felt so useless. My wife is sitting there going through so much pain and agony, and there's absolutely nothing I can do. She can't eat, I can't bring her food, she really doesn't want to drink or doesn't drink much, has a couple ice chips. There's so little that you can do, and so I don't know how I would have done it different. I wouldn't have done it different. Just being there, letting her know that I am there to support her and there to do anything she needs, and letting her know you're excited too. Keeping that element to it, instead of just scared or nervous or just bored, whatever it is. Letting her know that there's still excitement there. That I couldn't wait for this to happen. It was really a neat thing for me. We had at least one or two scary moments with the pregnancy when something would change in my wife's vitals. Her heart rate would dip, or she has really low blood pressure. That would dip, and it's just scary. I don't know exactly what it means or why. And then they also have the monitors on the babies, so you can see when things are going on with them, and that's really scary that those things happen to the kids, and it's unavoidable. It's part of that process. I was fortunate and happy that we were in good medical centers where when those things happened, it wasn't just, oh yeah, those happen in pregnancy. It was typically followed by just some action, whether they were just coddling us to make us feel better, or it really warranted action. They would go and get a physician and ask about what was going to happen, or just have it explained to us why it might be happening and what they're going to do to help us get through it. I like that, and some of that may have been them calming us, but I really appreciated that there was immediate action after some of these things happen. So I set out to not look when my wife gave birth. I had seen, during medical school, I had seen a cadaver, and I was not happy about it. I didn't enjoy it. That was just not for me. So I assumed body stuff was not me. I'm a finance major. I never signed up to do anything with bodies. So I went into the delivery trying to not see anything. I wanted to be supportive and helpful and be at my wife's head and hold her hand for all of it. And I did not want to see anything. But it turned out that I saw everything on all three of them. And it was not gross or weird at all. I'm sure there's something in knowing what's going on and why it's going on, but I didn't find any of that gross or weird to me. The whole process was just sort of beautiful, and I think in everything that happens in that process, it's such a minor thing. It's something that certainly occupies your mind beforehand, but once pregnancy happens and you're there in the room, it just wasn't on my mind, and it didn't concern me. The first night with our kids, I can remember a little bit, mainly like, for example, our first, the labor was like 50 hours, 40 something or 50 something hours, multiple days, no sleep, and so that first night was the most dead sleep I've ever had in my life. And the nurses were in and out giving baby to mom, and I don't remember any of that. I just remember waking up and being a bit tired. But the first nights home with each of the kids, one thing I love about that is that they were all different, and in ways that are really true to them even today. In the nurture versus nature debate, prior to having kids, I would have been much more on the side of nurture. But now that I have kids and I've seen 3 of them come from the same parents in the same way and be so drastically different from the first day, I couldn't be more on the other side of that coin, in the nature side of things. And so each of the kids, like our first was and still is very spirited. So, the crying or when she was upset was just, highly spirited. She wasn't really terribly cranky or anything, but she really let you know when she was upset. And our second was much more laid back, and his first night was much more like that. And our third is also different in that she is spirited like our first, but she also really likes to just be held and just sort of go with the flow and be a part of the action. So as long as she was part of the action in the way she wanted to be, it was no problem. And if not, she was going to let you know. So sleep negotiations with my wife weren't really negotiations. My wife made me a more than generous offer, and I just accepted. My wife wanted to breastfeed and was so excited about breastfeeding that she just didn't need or request my involvement during the night, and that was a beautiful and wonderful thing. And so I would do my best to make up for it during the day in allowing my wife to take a nap or take a break. But my wife is a very high energy person and just loves being with her kids, so she didn't ask too much of me during the day either, until she was headed back to work and everything. Yeah, one thing I love about kids is the fact that we got so excited about small things again. Like, I remember very much each of their first really good solid poops, that was just like this great big event, which is funny to me because I'm highly immature and poop is funny, but it's just funny to me that was the things that would have excited me in life prior to kids, and how much has changed. The fact that someone's first solid poop is like a legitimate happy successful moment in your day is a good example of how my life has changed so much since having kids. So with our first daughter, we had a colicky baby, and so from about 5 or 6 at night until whenever she decided to stop, 10, 11, 12, 1, she would cry and cry, scream inconsolably, and it was just, it was very, very frustrating. I had the very very illogical thought that this was my life now, that it would always be like this. And I knew better, but in that moment it feels very permanent, and it's a very tough one to deal with, especially when you've done everything you know to do for the baby, and baby's still just so upset. We only found really one thing that helped a little bit, and it only helped towards the end when she was probably getting better on her own anyway, and that was white noise. So we had heard the suggestion that you run the vacuum while the baby is sleeping, and so we had a battery-powered vacuum, and it wasn't very loud, so we would turn it on for a little bit, and it would die. So we would then go get our plug-in vacuum and turn it on, and it was just way too loud. So we'd have to have it in the next room, and then keep it on, but just for a little bit. It is embarrassing how long it took us to figure out that there's white noise machines, there's white noise CDs, there's lots of options if you need white noise for yourself or your babies. And ever since we found those, they are indispensable. We always have them with us, whether it's for us in our room or babies being separated from whatever other activities going on while we're traveling. We always have them with us. They're always playing in our house. They're absolutely indispensable for us. So we did a lot of sleep training. We learned a lot about sleep training. My wife is a pediatrician, and it's something she talks about all the time and knows a lot about. And so with our first daughter, while she was in training, we got some advice from another pediatrician that the babies would eventually need to be able to soothe themselves and be able to get through the night on their own, and that you just have to let them cry it out. So we did this. We decided on a night and sat and had a drink and let our first baby cry, and it was the worst night of our child raising lives. Just terrible, awful. And what I learned about that was that pediatrician didn't know us and didn't know our daughter and didn't have a clue. He just had a blanketed piece of advice. And that's one thing I really dislike about advice. I hate getting advice. I love to hear examples and ways things worked for other people, but I don't really want to hear what you think I need to have to hear. So once we took that knowledge and Christina's further knowledge after that and applied it to our kids' personality and what worked best for us, we found a much better medium where the first night we would let baby cry for just maybe 5 minutes, and then go in and say, it's okay, good night, love you, let them cry again for 5 minutes, go back in, and then on the next night we would stretch that just to 7 minutes or 10 minutes and kept going up from there, and it's not as gradual as you think. Eventually they get the hint, and I think some people have a worry that they're really hurting the baby or making the baby feel abandoned or whatever the reason is they feel that isn't very nice to baby, but that's certainly one way to look at it, and they may be right. But the way I chose to look at it, again, I may be wrong, but was that we were giving our kids the confidence to sleep on their own. And then after that point, I think the clues of its success is that after they got that confidence, they slept better, longer, and ultimately, physically, that's what they need. So I was really happy with that. I'm a firm believer in sleep training, and sleep training as soon as you're able, as well as being as consistent as possible. So I know that I'm different than my parents, and as I grow up, I see that more and more. The past gets sort of clearer and clearer now that I have a new lens to view it through. I think that I'm actually a bit more strict than my parents. I didn't have a lot of discipline growing up. I certainly had enough. I didn't do anything out of line too often, which is maybe why I didn't have too much discipline enforced upon me. But I sort of craved it, and I still crave it. I crave some order and some discipline, and so I like to think about giving my kids a structure in their day and in their behavior, so that they can have a clear understanding of what's expected, a clear understanding of what will keep us happy and keep them happy, so that they know what we expect of them. That there's not a gray area, that I don't snap at them for one thing and reward them for it the next day, or or allow something one night but it's not okay the next night. That stuff I think gets confusing to kids when they're younger. So I like, as often as I can, to just avoid that and have some set ideas of what I'll accept from them, what I won't, and where to draw the line. And so that's been an interesting thing to see. I think most people in my generation maybe would go the other way on that their parents were probably more strict and they've loosened up a little bit. And I don't know. I think that's sort of unique. I think our generation is really different from past dads, and I believe the assumption or the connotation that comes along with that, maybe connotation is not the word, but I think the thing that comes along with that a lot of times is that we're better than past generations. And I don't feel that way at all, and I don't think that's fair. I think we're definitely different. I personally feel that I want a much more involved role in my family, but I had a dad that was really involved. I lost him early, so I don't have a perfect example that I can remember, but I had a dad that was a lot more involved, and I always wanted to be involved in my kid's life. But I certainly can see, and even in knowing friends that aren't as involved, where work has to be more of a priority for them, I absolutely see why it happens and how they feel about kids. I don't discount that for a second. I think it's important to understand that about people and not fault them for being themselves. I don't hold it against people that aren't really involved dads. It's the way I choose to be, and I feel it's an incredibly beneficial thing for your kids and for yourself. But I'm not right on everything, and certainly, I'm just me. I dislike how much people want to represent their generation, like, oh yeah, our generation does this, and I do that, or I do that because this is what our generation does, or our generation is going this way or that way. Certainly generalities arise, but I'm just me, and I see some dads like me, and I see others not like me, and I'm absolutely okay with that. I celebrate. I want to celebrate the fact that we're different, that we don't have to be the same, that it doesn't have to be done the same way, that there isn't a right way. And instead of arguing those differences, I'm happy to debate, but I don't have an argument here. I'm not about to say right and wrong, because I doubt that I'm right. So an issue I struggle with that I didn't see coming is sort of the caveman voice in the back of my head telling me that I should be providing for my family in a different way than I am. Logically, staying at home was a great choice for me and my family. I wouldn't regret it for a second. And the thing I think about often as to why I wouldn't regret it is, if I was talking to my adult children and we just met them, say at college, or they came home with a significant other and we're just chatting, and if I were recalling their childhood and I told them, I did enjoy spending time with you, but I really had wanted to make a certain advancement in my career or make this different move professionally, I wouldn't feel nearly as proud about telling them that as I would about saying, I went to school, I had professional options and things I wanted to do in my career, but none of them seemed as important as raising my kids. And I would be really proud to tell my kids that someday. And so that's a big reason why I feel comfortable doing what I'm doing. Logically, I don't see even the slightest bit wrong with it, but I do have a caveman in the back of my head that I'm sure comes from society, and not all just that. I mean, it probably also comes from just who I am and what I like doing. And it may speak to the fact that this doesn't fit me perfectly, but it tells me, you should be providing for your family in a different way, or you should be out there earning money for the family. And I don't think I agree with it logically, but it's not right to just dismiss that and say that it's wrong. It's just a voice that that I hear and I feel, and I struggle with, and I know some stay-at-home dads that absolutely don't, and I know plenty that do. In fact, I would say most of the stay-at-home dads I know do struggle with that, but end at a similar conclusion to me. Because of how they love their kids and what they want to do for their families. I have been really lucky to wind up in places that had a lot of stay-at-home dads. During residency, we were in a very small town, but we had a great core group of stay-at-home dads. And it was phenomenal because I had many, many good examples of how to be a dad. Also very different examples. Each one of those dads differed greatly, but the core was always there, that they loved their kids and wanted to provide something good for their family. So I take most of my parenting examples from that group of stay-at-home dads I had during residency, and the stay-at-home dads that I continue to find. I always see different examples and good ideas of how I'd want to be as a dad, and I want to be a part of actively becoming a better dad. I think a lot of people end up sort of being a dad by default. Like, okay, I have a kid, I guess I need to be a dad, and this is how I typically am, so that's the kind of dad I am, and that's not me. Part of that may have been when I lost my dad and had to seek out examples. I continue to seek out examples, and I like to talk with other dads about what they're doing and how they're doing it, just for camaraderie, example, just to get a view of how it's done. So I've had a couple experiences I don't enjoy too much. The one that always sticks out to me is in the supermarket while I'm shopping with the 3 kids. Inevitably, I'll get a comment from a grandmother, and it's usually very kind, but it's also usually a little backhanded, like giving me advice on a special, or to check the eggs before I buy them to see if they're not cracked. And in my more cynical moments, I kind of just want to tell her, I know your husband might not have been much help, but I've got this. I do this for my family, and there's nothing bad about it, or nothing. There's no ill intent in those moments, but they just sort of reinforce some of those stereotypical things about our society and how they feel about dads and what dads do in a family, and moms and what moms do in a family, and that's changing, and a lot of people know that. Some people don't, but I don't enjoy those interactions when they happen. My proudest moment as a parent with all of my kids is whenever they include someone else socially. Especially if it's somebody that isn't typically included, or may not be included by others. That is absolutely my proudest moment. It's something I'm always pushing for. Whenever we get to a situation, I always push my kids to just say hello and introduce themselves, and maybe notice something nice about the other kids, like a shirt with Batman, and to comment and say something nice. And so my proudest moments absolutely are whenever they include a kid that might not be included, or whenever they just include somebody socially. That's something that I care about, and it makes me so proud when I see it from my kid. So my experience of going from 1 child to 2 was that at first it was much more than double the work. It seemed like all of a sudden we had 3 kids, and eventually that that really changed though. Once a couple things like naps started syncing up, and especially when meals started syncing up, it felt like much less than twice the work. Like I don't even feel now that it is even much more work than having one kid. It is, but in my sense of the situation, it never seems to be too much more than it was with one. Even now that we have three, since we have three that are mobile, that are eating about the same meals, it's not too difficult. I intentionally am working on a few things to make it more of a simple thing and more like having one kid, and a lot of that has to do with asking the kids to take care of some things for themselves. So getting them in the habit of returning their plate to the counter after a meal is tiny, but it makes a huge difference. I took our entryway, and we had just a normal closet with a bifold door, and I tore that out and put in sort of a cubby system with hooks and their names above them, so that they each have a designated location where when they come in, they put their stuff. Prior to that, coming into the house meant me hanging up 5 jackets. And if I did that in every scenario, I would absolutely be overwhelmed, and feel like it's just so much to do. But when you bake some of those other processes into your day, like, okay, we're home, and everything goes on your hook and under your, under the bench, it's about managing the family instead of just taking care of them or whatever, and that's the way I approach it. And I don't know everyone does, but that's something that helps me make multiple kids feel much more manageable. So our kids, I feel like we're very lucky that our kids have been extremely loving and accepting of their siblings. I don't know exactly what we did around that. We didn't do anything too active, except for just talk about the new arrival often. We just say, oh, we're so excited for baby. What do you think baby will be like? Just talking about baby all the time, and our excitement about it and sharing that with our kids. I think that's just about all we did. Other people have a lot of cool ideas, like getting presents for the oldest when baby comes, or having the oldest help pick out names or something like that. And there's way better ideas than just those I mentioned, but we didn't do too many of those. The one thing I would suggest is just sharing your excitement about the new baby with your kids, and then also, maybe it was just me feeling an insecurity, but I talked a lot about how this makes our love grow in our family, and I didn't spend time warning the kids that I'm going to have to split my attention now and it's going to be very different. I didn't really spend any time warning them about those things. I spent time, telling them how exciting it is to grow, have someone else to love and someone else to care for. I don't know. That's something I thought worked out well for us, and I don't know. I'm guessing that we're also a bit lucky. I do feel a little bit of guilt splitting my attention now that we have multiple kids, but it's also evened out when I see them enjoy each other, or I see them learn new things because I have to split my attention. Our daughter's become a really interesting storyteller now that she has sometimes needs to play on her own. I think she has developed this really cool storytelling that I don't know that she would have had if we didn't have multiple kids. And in life, how often is someone giving you undivided attention? I don't think it's a bad thing for kids to learn that, to learn that they need to find their interest, their thing to go find and do while everyone else is busy. And eventually, they head into school where they're absolutely not getting one-on-one attention, and that's okay. That's the way the world is. So I was a finance major, and my last year of school I was in a student-run hedge fund, and so I thought I would go off into sort of the world of finance, and then life happened, and I didn't really do any of that. But the way that my profession has informed the way I parent is it's pretty practical. I think I want to give my kids an understanding of money outside of savings, investing, and those simple things. I'd like my kids to have an understanding of money in how empowering it can be. That if you give yourself options financially, that you can have options in your life, you can have a little bit of freedom. And that doesn't mean that if you make enough money you get freedom. That means a lot of things. That means if you choose to save right, you can have freedom. If you make enough money, you can have freedom. Or it always comes down to some sort of sacrifice, and you got to choose which one you want to sacrifice. So my biggest passion is building. I love building, remodeling, and doing things like that. I think that I can't wait. I absolutely can't wait to do those projects with my kids and show them how to do those things. One of the just most heartwarming moments of my year this year was when my wife asked our kids why they love Daddy during Father's Day, and my son said, because he's always fixing something. And I don't know why, but that just fills my heart, because that's something I love doing. I don't think it changes, well, it does. It changes a little bit how I parent, because I want my kids to know if you have the time and focus, that you can figure out just about anything that you really need to make or you really need for your life. Especially around the house, I think something that happens is people see stuff as really complex because it's typically done by a professional, or typically done by somebody that does only plumbing, or an electrician that only handles electricity. I think people assume that it's much more complicated and that it must need to be done by a professional, and I'm sure they're probably right about a lot of that, but I don't want my kids to be afraid of those things. I want them to understand that all of those things were developed quite some time ago by somebody that's probably not any smarter than they are, nor any dumber. So have respect both ways. I mean, respect the fact that this is complex enough that there's people that make it a profession, but don't forget that it was also created by somebody that is no more intelligent than you. And most of this stuff that we're using in our homes was created a really long time ago. So I am excited to pass that along to my kids. That's something that I really didn't necessarily have in my upbringing. It's an interest of mine and something I've pursued. And there's so many resources now that you can find to get done whatever you'd like to get done around the home or building or something. And something interesting I think about that, and another way that passion sort of informs my parenting is that I never thought of myself as a creative person. When I was growing up, I couldn't draw, and I couldn't paint, and I wasn't a good sculptor. So when I didn't do anything really exciting or unique in art class, I assumed, well, that's because I'm not a creative person. But I've discovered through a couple of things. Through designing my bag for Chobby Outfitters, I found that I absolutely am a creative person. I just don't exercise that muscle very often, and I don't have some of the skills that most people that call themselves creative have. I have a different set of skills, and so I approach creativity. I like working within constraints, and I like reiterating. I'm not a very good person to set out, have a vision, and finish something as is, but I love to try something, adjust, and find what works, find what's right, and that's very much the creative process. But I didn't understand that because I think the definition of a creative person is so narrow usually, that I didn't understand that was creativity. And so I want my kids to understand that about my passion about building and doing things around the home and doing other things. That's another way I fulfill my creative potential and my creative excitement. If my kids came to me when they were becoming parents and told me they wanted to stay home, I would be supportive, but I would be very realistic with them. I would share with them my experience, which is that it's not all rainbows and sunshine, that it's not just as lovey-dovey as I expected, and that especially if my son wanted to do this, that it's not as accepted as you realize, or it's not as accepted as I maybe thought it was, and that puts a subtle effect on you. So when I started staying at home and started having just a little bit of down moments and a little bit of depression, something I really did not understand that I needed was validation. Validation that what I was doing was beneficial to my family and acceptable by the people around me and valued by myself, my community, the people around me. And I didn't always know or feel that regularly, and it's something I needed. And that's really the reason I created Chubby Outfitters. That's why I want to create products made for dads, so that they may see that and have just some small sense of validation that the world appreciates what you're doing and is ready to make things for you. And that's me fitting two parts of myself together. I am an entrepreneur and a finance individual, but anyone that knows me also knows I've got a big heart, and I care about the world and about the people I love and the people around me. So that's me just sort of fusing those two parts of myself together into what I think could be a really beautiful thing. So yeah.